Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, everyone, depending where you're joining from in the world. My name is James Ellsmore. I'll be one of your technical supporting people behind the scenes today, and please feel free to message me in the chat if you have any technical issues. Just a quick message to say we have a chat box which is open for you to add in your comments. Feel free to go ahead now and introduce yourself there so other attendees know who else is joining us. If you have any questions for the panelists, please make sure that you add those to the Q&A box so our moderator will be able to access them. Just to note that this session is now recording and be aware of that. And finally, we hope after this session, you'll join us for the networking opportunity using a different platform called Remo, where you'll have the chance to interact with other guests. I'll hand over to our moderator now, and thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. Before I introduce the panel, I would like to answer a few questions posed in the last session. The first question was about integration of coastal blue carbon habitats into carbon compensation mechanisms and international labels. And I would refer to tomorrow's session where we have a policy expert from IUCN who may be able to answer this question. If not, you could look at the series of webinars that we're hosting, and one of them actually is focused on policy as well. The second question is about learning more about whales and carbon sinks and how we could integrate their preservation into international compensation mechanisms. And just to point out that we do have a webinar focused specifically on marine vertebrate carbon services. That's going to be in 2 or 3 weeks. So I would join that one and we can answer that question there. The next question is on if the project has produced a report on the status of and science and policy for blue carbon ecosystems. And I think some of our partners have definitely produced some guidance on that. And that should be available at the Blue Forest Solutions Toolkit, which we will launch tomorrow, and other avenues. And the fourth question is, how did you approach communities for implementation in these respective countries and the intermediaries involved in explaining the benefits of such a project? So just to be clear, the Blue Forest Project works through partners. So our local partners, the organizations that I identified in the presentation, are the ones that were responsible for doing the communications and engagement at the local level with local communities and with national governments. And okay, so thank you very much. So for today's panel, we'll be joined by Blue Forest's ambassadors and experts from around the world who will be discussing the relevance of blue forests and blue carbon in the current state of marine conservation, sustainability, and climate policy. And just a note to the audience, if you have any questions for the panelists, please write them in the Q&A window down below, and we will try to address your questions as we go forward. Thank you. I'd like to now introduce the panelists. I think if the panelists can switch on their videos, I'll just start. Okay, so I'd like to introduce the panelists, and this will, I'm just going to sort of name off some names, and then I'll get into each section. So we're going to be joined now by Mark Spalding. He's the president of the Ocean Foundation and a member of the Ocean Studies Board and the U.S. National Committee for Decade and Ocean Science and Sustainable Development of the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. Next, we will also be joined by Dr. Pacifica Acheng. Ugola is the director of and head of Climate Change Directorate for the Ministry of Kenya, the Kenyan Ministry of Environment and Forestry. She's also the national focal point to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, on climate, and the Nairobi Convention. Next, Ronnie Gemot is a former, and could be some interesting news there, cabinet minister and current ambassador to the Republic of Seychelles. He's also currently the chair of SIDSTOC, the SIDS Global Sustainable Energy and Climate Resilient Organization, and he was the chief spokesperson of the Alliance of Small Island States from 2012 to 2014. Next, we have Stephanie Okenden, who is an official with the UK Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, who leads a portfolio on ocean and climate and change policy and international evidence, which includes preparations towards the UK presidency of COP26 and ocean action under the UK G7 presidency. And finally, we have Peter Hogan, is the program director for global development at the Institute of Marine Research in Norway, and presently co-chairs the expert group of the high-level panel on sustainable ocean economy. Okay, first, I'd like to introduce Mark Spalding. Would you like to begin by introducing yourself and describing your work to the audience, Mark?
Thanks very much, Stephen, and it's great to be here. Hello to everybody. Stephen's already told you a little bit about me, so let me tell you a little bit about our organization and our role in Blue Forests. We host a project called Blue Climate Solutions that promotes conservation of world's coasts and ocean as a proactive and viable solution to climate change. It also hosts a Blue Climate Coalition that was founded in 2009, representing 100 conservation groups, environmental stakeholders, and 150 scientists from 43 countries around the world. The Ocean Foundation is the only community foundation for the ocean, and we're dedicated to reversing the trend of destruction of ocean environments around the world. Together with Blue Climate Solutions, we played a role of co-financing in the Blue Forest Project. The Ocean Foundation has been working on blue carbon since 2008, and we created the first ever blue carbon focused offset calculator called Seagrass Grow back then. We have had a big focus on the integration of blue carbon efforts to mitigate ocean acidification. So when we talk about financing, we have to ask ourselves, what is the cost of providing funding for long-term continuous monitoring or observations of restoration and conservation sites? So we have to know what the cost of restoration and conservation is, and also the value of what we are protecting. Thus, the underlying question is, what is the sustainable finance opportunity that exists to restore and conserve blue carbon? Now we can talk in great detail, and I'm not going to bore you today about blended finance for this application. Private finance can go in here, including public equity, private equity, indirect efforts by governments that support governance reform or in the enabling conditions, or other indirect support that fosters knowledge transfers or capacity building. We can also look at public finance, national appropriations that are direct or that are indirect through investment banks and multilateral finance institutions, or one-to-one foreign development assistance efforts. We also see that some governments have sovereign investment funds that can be put into these things. We had an experience on mangrove restoration in the United Arab Emirates, for example. And then, of course, there can be fees and fines and things like that, and trust funds established. There's also a lot of conversation about private and public debt as a finance mechanism. Seychelles is one of the first ever blue bonds, and so you can have public loans and guarantees, development of credits, development of debt swaps and debt forgiveness in these blue bonds and related efforts. But what I'm most interested in when I talk about this is, how do you track and prove that blue bond debt or other carbon finance regenerates the ecosystems in a manner that improves the receiving nation's economy? I'm going to assume that a debt swap does not improve or only little improves the debtor nation's financial condition. I'm also going to assume that non-debt financing puts money into the economy, creates restoration jobs or conservation and monitoring and vigilance jobs. And last, I'm going to assume that it's relatively easy to verify that the receiving nation has spent the new funds as promised. and has perhaps can show that ecosystems are healthier, or at least that we can measure that restoration or similar has actually occurred. But the piece that we need to figure out going forward is, how do we know we've created a virtuous upward cycle, a virtuous return, such that the finance receiving nation or debtor receiving nation is going to do better in the future because these systems are in better shape. What we're hoping for from all of this is the integration and strengthening of a sustainable blue economy by supporting adaptation, mitigation, and conservation through marine protected areas, doing blue carbon restoration and protection in those areas, all as mitigation for climate disruption and ocean acidification. We want to see the reduction of other and accumulating stressors alongside this. And abundance and biomass should be the focus of revitalization efforts in order to keep up with population growth and to support the economy as well. This is not about choosing conservation, protection versus the economy. Conservation, protection, enforcement, and preservation are good, they work, and they support economic activity. Abundance has to be our goal for food security and healthy ecosystems. This will allow us to get ahead of population growth and the ever-increasing demands on all resources. Developing the new blue economy requires a wide range of partners, including on-the-ground NGOs, scientists researching sustainability and ecosystem services, lawyers like me defining terms, experts seeking to apply new technologies to monitoring and solutions, financial and philanthropic institutions helping to bring the economic models and financing to bear, and by working directly with local economic, natural, and environmental ministries, agencies, and departments. These many partners are identifying the leading sectors where smart investment can ensure that natural infrastructure and resilience are secure in order to guarantee clean air and water, climate and community resiliency, healthy food, access to nature, and progress towards restoring the abundance our children and grandchildren will need. Historically, we've taken too much good stuff out of the ocean, and we've put too much bad stuff into the ocean. This trend must stop, and we must restore our coasts and oceans' abundance and repair harm where we can. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you very much for your statement. Dr. Asheng, would you like to also begin to introduce yourself and describe your work to the audience?
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen. My name is Dr. Pacifica Achieng Ogola. I work for the Ministry of Environment and Forestry in Kenya as the head of climate change and climate change directorate. I'm also the United Nations Framework Convention focal point and the Nairobi Convention focal point. And as a result, my responsibility involves domesticating and implementing those international conventions. I'd just like to start by thanking you for inviting me to this meeting. And before I start, I want to say life is like an echo. So what you send out is what you get back. This is like what the late Professor Wangari Maathai once said, that if you take care of nature, nature will automatically take care of you. Our natural resource systems, as we all know, are governed by natural cycles with the embedded equilibrium or balance. And to understand nature, one needs to either directly interact with it at the local level and through knowledge that is passed from generation to generation. And I can attest to this at a personal experience level, or through research and scientific studies and acquired knowledge, or just basically through interest and nature tourism. Our lack of understanding and excessive exploitation of nature has pushed the planet to the brink, resulting in triple global emergencies, namely climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, and waste. As you're all aware, the Paris Agreement long-term global goal on temperature, the IPCC 1.5 degree report, and the EBIS report have all presented evidence of anthropogenic impacts of our climate systems and biodiversity with very worrying results. There has also been a new focus on oceans since the adoption of the SDGs in 2015. And of particular relevance or of interest to this discussion is the SDG responsible for climate change and life underwater and life on land. And most recently, the 4-in-1 decade, this is just a name that I coined, 4-in-1 decade of the decade of ocean science for sustainable development, the UN decade on ecosystem restoration, the decade of implementation of the Paris Agreement, and also the decade for implementation of the sustainable development goals, all recognize that ecosystem restoration is one of the key most important ways of delivering nature-based solutions for food security, climate change mitigation, adaptation, and biodiversity loss. Further studies have indicated that coastal wastelands, namely mangrove seagrass and tidal salt marshes, sequester more carbon than terrestrial forest. I think most of the people in this room are aware of this and therefore have very high mitigation potential, as well as coastal adaptation and resilience co-benefits for local community. Unfortunately, coastal ecosystem services provided by this blue forest have not been properly accounted for, and therefore not sufficiently integrated with other socioeconomic values in the coastal zones. Here in Kenya, our mangrove forests cover over 61,271 hectares along a coastal stretch of 536 kilometers. And our coastal communities use mangroves, and they have used mangroves since time immemorial to supply local needs for fuel, fences, house construction, building boats, fish traps, medicinal value, and also in some areas, the mangroves are considered a sacred forest, what we call here in Kenya, the kayas, where the coastal communities forbid destruction of forest. They have also harnessed commercial values of mangroves, which have also resulted in generating employment and income for those communities. And overexploitation of mangroves in Kenya has been very severe in the recent past, with severe degradation being witnessed, particularly in Mombasa County and Kilifi counties. These are devolved governments along the coastal zones in Kenya. The government of Kenya has ratified several international and regional conventions related to climate change, biodiversity, oceans, and also demonstrated global leadership in promoting sustainable blue economy, and is co-hosting the next ocean conference with Portugal, among other notable achievements that I cannot discuss in this meeting because of the time limit. We have also put in place key policy documents and institutional frameworks that are targeting protection and conservation of climate action, mangroves and coastal ecosystems, marine protected areas, which includes marine park and marine reserves and community-owned protected areas. We have also initiated land and marine spatial planning with a lot of progress from the State Department of Blue Economy. We have also legal and policy instruments that govern forest, wildlife protection, and conservation. Most notable ones, policy documents that we have that you can make reference to is the National Climate Change Action Plan for 2018-2022, which takes cognizance and identify oceans and marine ecosystems as a priority area for Kenya. We have also integrated coastal zone management plan. We have the mangrove ecosystem management plan, and we also have a high-level blue economy committee at the presidency, and of course, a State Department relevant for blue economy. All these policy instruments are at different levels of implementation with varied success rate, presenting an opportunity for further action. Several programs addressing degradation and deforestation of our mangroves at local levels with success, among others, include mangrove community-based conservation groups, such as Mikoko Pamoja, selling carbon credits and supporting local communities to incentivize protection or conservation through voluntary carbon markets. Just to mention a few, there are several projects also which are managed by other partners. And we also have upcoming several projects along the coast, which are also applying for voluntary carbon credits, which include the Vanga Jimbo Kiwegu, a community project, There's also another one called Abent, Commensam Mangrove Rehabilitation Group, and the Jipe Moyo. And just to say that this scope has been expanded in our recently updated NDC. And as you're all aware that we submitted our NDC in December 2020. And in the updated NDC, we have taken cognizance of also multiple cross-cutting commitments embedded in the UN Convention for Biological Diversity, UN Convention for Combating Desertification, and also including the provisions of the Paris Agreement, in particular Article 5 of the Paris Agreement on REDD+. We've also included articles, provisions on Article 6 and potential for using of these offsets for aviation under the ICAO and private sector initiative, SDG 14, and among others, just to mention a few. So with this inclusion of this in our NDC, it opens up space for more growth and more opportunities for Kenya moving forward. As we prepare for COP26 and COP15, we hope that we'll be able to also use that opportunity to present what Kenya is doing and what our expectations are in blue economy, in the blue economy space. And our updated NDC actually commits to reducing emissions by 32% against a business as usual scenario of 143 million tons of CO2 equivalent by 2030, and at a cost of $62 billion US, and as components of mitigation and adaptation and means of implementation. So as I said earlier, unlike our first NDC, we did not include any information about coastal zones or mangroves or blue forest. In the updated NDC, this is coming out very clearly, and as we develop our next action plan, we intend to carry this forward to that plan that will implement the NDC. So there's still an opportunity to bring projects on board because we have not finalized the development of the next action plan that will inform the implementation of our updated NDC. We are also working on the long-term strategy for 2050, and there's a lot of opportunity also to design projects and to make policy decisions that will accelerate improvement in our management of coastal ecosystems. And the only thing that we did not include in our updated NDC include underwater seagrass meadows, but we understand that there's a lot of potential around the Gazi Bay area, and also we did not include issues to do with coral reefs management. So these are things that there's room for improvement in our next action plan. But this also shows the untapped potential for the Kenyan coast. So in our NDC, we also recognize the adaptation benefits, which include storm protection and sea level rise and coastal erosion. And investing in these forms of green infrastructure also provide essential ecosystem services, such as food security, biodiversity, and more cost-effective than the gray infrastructure that have been fronted for before this. So with this, we intend to keep our diplomacy in sustainable blue economy because the Kenya government is very keen. And as I said earlier, we have a very high level committee that is focused on this, that will unleash opportunities for private sector and government to partner and work closely with local communities to provide direct benefits and ensure ocean conservation. So commitments to conservation of these ecosystems also serve as a signal to multiple potential avenues for financial support and development of our blue economy. So in terms of climate finance, our NDC actually has given the right signal and the right message to those partners who want to come and work with us to make sure that we improve our coastal zone management and also harness as much as we can, our blue forest. So we are hoping that we'll be able to get this support and also set the baseline for the blue carbon forest, since it's the first time that we are putting this in our NDC, and work with partners to help us to also update this in the mangrove ecosystem management plan, and also to mobilize resources to make sure that no one is left behind. And this is also going to be looked at in very close. We are going to partner with our colleagues from our State Department of Blue Economy, who are already working on a land and a marine special plan to address some of the gaps that we have as a country. So as I conclude, I say, despite the gaps and the challenges, I'm persuaded that the future is bright for our blue forest. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Achang, for your statement. And I just wanted to let you know that through the Blue Forest Project, we've been helping with a number of helping Kenya with a number of activities that you've related, including the exploration of seagrass carbon on the voluntary carbon market. And that's quite exciting, yes. To the audience, please ask questions through the Q&A and not the chat. I've been told to tell everybody that for those who are being naughty in the audience. And next, we have Ambassador Jameau. Would you kindly like to begin introducing yourself and describing your work to the audience? Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Yes, I'm Ronnie Jameau. I'm Seychelles' former ambassador. I was twice ambassador to the United Nations, United States, Canada, also to Brazil, Jamaica, Cuba, and the Caribbean islands. I was also Seychelles' ambassador at large for climate change, sustainability, conservation, oceans, and island issues. I'm now retired from the government and back home in Seychelles and working as a private consultant in these areas. Now, what I want to do is use Seychelles as an example of how blue forests are one of the most precious natural climate resources that small islands have. Even more so when we act as big ocean states, which we count ourselves as you will see. Now, obviously, everybody knows Seychelles is famous for white sandy beaches. But our other coastal and marine ecosystems include dunes, wetlands, mangrove forests, seagrass beds, and coral reefs. We have a ridge to reef approach, which recognizes the interconnections between terrestrial, coastal, and marine ecosystems, and also the interconnection between mitigation and adaptation strategies to protect, manage, and restore these ecosystems. Our blue economy approach recognizes that our natural capital is the basis of our economy and central to our resilience, sustainable development, and human well-being. What I mean by being central is that, like many islands, Seychelles' two most important economic sectors are tourism and fisheries, which depend on thriving, safe, and resilient coastal and marine ecosystems. We have for some years now been implementing several ecosystem-based, EBA projects. They focus on restoring mountain wetlands and water systems, especially as to how they connect with the coast, dunes and mangroves, and reconnecting coastal wetlands to improve drainage and reduce flooding. Several NGOs, and Seychelles, surprisingly for such a small island, has quite a number of NGOs in the environment sector. Several of them are carrying out coral restoration on a number of islands. The highlight of Seychelles' nature-based efforts was last year, when we protected 30% of our territorial waters and exclusive economic zone under the Seychelles Marine Spatial Plan, which we understand is the second biggest MSP in the world. In 2012, we go back to 2012, Seychelles committed at the Rio Plus 20 summit to protect 30% of our waters by 2020. So we committed to a 30 by 20 9 years ago, before the current 30 by 30 initiative. The 30 by 30 initiative, as you know, is a campaign, a global campaign to protect at least 30% of the global ocean by 2030 through a network of highly and fully protected marine areas, including on the high seas. When Seychelles delivered on our Rio Plus 20 commitment last year, we tripled the SDG and CBD Aichi targets of 10% of ocean protection by 2020, a deadline that most of the world missed. Let's understand how huge this is for Seychelles. Seychelles' exclusive economic zone is at 1.34 million square kilometers, or more than 500,000 square miles, bigger than South Africa, bigger than Egypt, and more than twice the size of France. The 30% we protect, 410,000 square kilometers, is bigger than Germany or Japan. Half of this, of that 30%, that is 15% of our EEZ, is fully protected no-take zones. They're almost the size of Great Britain and larger than Greece or Bangladesh. To protect so much ocean, we created 13 marine protected areas across the archipelago. Seychelles is now seeking partners and resources to implement, manage, enforce, and finance our protected areas, and working on legislation for each of the 13 MPAs. No one is going to accuse us of having paper parks. In addition, we will protect at least 50% of our seagrass and mangrove ecosystems by 2025 and 100% by 2030. We will map seagrass beds and mangroves throughout our EEZ and assign a blue carbon value to them as carbon sinks. We want to know how much blue carbon our MPAs store and add this to our contribution to the global fight against climate change. Seychelles will therefore establish a long-term monitoring program for seagrass and mangrove habitats and include our blue forests in our national greenhouse gas inventory by 2025. We will also prioritize nature-based solutions in all regulations and legislation for coastal planning and infrastructure. All this is subject to external financial and technical support. And with partners at home and abroad, we're now identifying innovative and traditional financing mechanisms, including carbon markets. As you heard earlier, we already have some experience in this. We're funding some of our marine and blue economy work with the proceeds of a first of its kind debt swap for the ocean and the world's first sovereign blue bond. Our next milestone in using nature to mitigate and adapt to climate change. In our next milestone, we're right now incorporating our blue forests in our revised and upgraded naturally determined contribution or climate pledge to the Paris Agreement in keeping with IPCC guidelines. To end, small islands have, by definition, scarce land. For example, Seychelles' ocean space is 3,000 times bigger than all our 115 islands put together, making us a big ocean state hampered by small island resources. So with support from international partners, SIDS can make an outsized contribution to the fight against climate change if we act like big ocean states, if we use natural solutions, and if we protect and value our blue forests. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ambassador Jumeau, for your statement. Our next speaker is Ms. Hogan. Would you like to begin by introducing yourself and describing your work to your audience, please? Thank you.
Thank you, and greetings to you all. So I'm Stephanie Hogan. I sit in the UK's Environment Ministry and cover a portfolio on the ocean and climate change, policy and international evidence. In short, all things to do with the ocean and COP26. And it's my many thanks to the organisers for bringing us together today, and on behalf of the UK, to thank you for inviting me to share the UK's priorities for this year and some reflections. It's an absolute pleasure to join you and to be alongside this esteemed panel. By way of introduction, I want to start by saying we're taking a holistic approach to this super year, so not just focusing on COP26. This year offers us an unparalleled opportunity to make progress for our ocean towards mitigating and adapting to climate change and improving our biodiversity. We're calling 2021 a super year for nature for this very reason. And this super year, we hope to seek agreement for an ambitious and transformational post-2020 global biodiversity framework at the CBD, including on 30 by 30, to bring forward the concluding negotiations for a new international agreement to conserve and sustainably use marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction as soon as possible. And we welcome the launch of the UN Decades of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and of Ecosystem Restoration, all of which we see as critical alongside our G7 and COP26 presidents, which we will use to catalyse change. But in terms of COP26 specifically, and where the blue aspects fit in with this, for the UK on the road to COP26 for the ocean, our priorities are on ambition, nature, adaptation and resilience, and of course, driving forward action on those fronts. As the incoming presidency of COP26, it's our honour to follow Chile in their hosting of the first Blue COP, and a top ocean priority for us is firstly to recognise that climate action is ocean action, and where we seek for every country to come forward with enhanced emission reduction targets in their nationally determined contributions to meet our collective agreements under Paris Agreement, recognising this is critical to avoid further irreversible damage to our ocean. And in this regard, we really applaud those who are leading the way in advance of COP26 on ocean NDCs, and including the integration of the ocean and the marine environment in your climate change strategies, blue forests, wider blue carbon habitats, and other marine nature-based solutions in your NDCs, national adaptation plans, adaptation communications are all key. And colleagues on the panel before me have done a fantastic job at really demonstrating the range of actions and efforts and ongoing work on this front. An equal priority for us in the UK, and of perhaps most relevance to this forum, is that we're really committed to putting nature at the heart of COP26 itself. We're advocating for initiatives that increase ambition and drive a step change in the use of nature-based solutions on land and in the ocean to support climate change, adaptation, resilience and mitigation, and to protect and restore vital ecosystems and biodiversity. This is very much for us about recognising those inextricable links in tackling climate change and biodiversity loss, and an ethos that's very much at the heart of the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, which aims to reset humanity's relationship with nature, to put biodiversity on the path of recovery, encouraging coordinated action to maximise the benefits of tackling biodiversity loss and climate change together. To say a few words about nature-based solutions more specifically and in the setting of the marine environment, we are championing marine nature-based solutions, including blue carbon, as critical for improving the ocean's natural resilience. This includes marine protection and restoration alongside sustainable management practices, which all have a critical role to play, providing both those climate change benefits, but also for biodiversity, for people, and for livelihoods. And here you'll notice that we really emphasize the term nature-based solutions, often used interchangeably with blue carbon, but we really consider it imperative to highlight the wider benefits of nature-based solutions beyond just carbon sequestration alone. On how we seek to achieve all this, for us, it's a case of focusing on the key enablers needed to deliver and support transformational ocean action, which we summarize as science, finance and development cooperation, and partnerships. And I'll say a few words on each in turn. On science, the science is clear on the case for urgent action. You're all well versed in this, and we believe we need transformational ocean science to underpin the ocean actions required in this next decade. The UN Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development presents us with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to drive actions. And it's been our honour as the UK G7 presidency to launch an initiative through the G7 to enhance our continued collaboration on ocean science and observations through the G7 Future of the Seas and Oceans Initiative and our new G7 Ocean Decade Navigation Plan. Ensuring we've got the evidence and making best use of this is really critical. So that includes targeting and identifying solutions, the design, delivery, through to the evaluation of policy. And so it's been fantastic to hear from the panel on their experiences and approaches and for this knowledge to be shared. A final note, perhaps on the science side of things in the blue carbon sphere, is that under the UNFCCC, we believe it's imperative to have that robustness in accounting and transparency, in particular towards NDCs, and where we really recognise the importance of the IPCC guidelines to underpin reporting on emission savings towards the Paris Agreement and working to improve the implementation of those. On finance and development cooperation, so global collaboration is going to be really key for delivering the global ocean action that we need in every part of the world, in every sea. And we're really committed to supporting the effective implementation of international goals and targets through this. As the UK, we launched at the weekend a £500 million Blue Planet Fund that will support developing countries to protect their marine resources, to reduce poverty across four key themes: climate change, marine pollution, overfishing, and biodiversity loss. And we recognise we must mobilise resources on all fronts, both public and private, if we are to meet our ambition with the action needed and to rebuild our economies in harmony with nature. Finally, on partnerships, so across all of our priorities, strong partnerships and collaborations are going to be required. And as the UK, we're really committed to working with partners internationally to promote safe, healthy and sustainable oceans, including through nature-based solutions. And so very welcoming of these conversations today to bring us together. The UK is of course honoured to be leading a number of key international partnerships, in particular our Global Ocean Alliance in support of 30 by 30, alongside many others that we join alongside key leaders. A few concluding words as I draw to a close. I leave you again with our top ocean priorities on the road to COP26 on ambition, nature and action. It's a super year and we're really keen to use the moment to raise awareness, raise ambition and raise actions. And we're committed to showcasing all of this and to inspiring others to do the same. We're seeking to build momentum and advocate for greater action at all levels, global down to local, championing collaborations and partnerships at every stage. And we really welcome conversations here. We look forward to, I hope, seeing many of you in Glasgow at the end of this year to really spotlight the ocean, the role of nature in turning the tide of climate change and its impacts, and to drive forward those real world outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden, for your statement. And finally, we have Peter Hogan. Peter, would you like to introduce yourself and your work to the audience? Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen, and thanks for having me here. So my name is Peter Hogan. I'm a program director at the Institute of Marine Research in Norway, where my responsibility is global development. Essentially, that means our involvement in projects around the world, in Africa, in the Indian Ocean, everything outside Europe, and linked to sustainable development. In addition, I'm presently the co-chair of the expert group for the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, and I'll say a little bit more about what that panel is all about in a minute. And have then served to produce a series of reports that support that panel. I also was chair of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission until 2019, and I've been very involved in preparing and developing the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And as I'll also explain, that has a potential to be a quite closely linked to the follow-up of this high-level panel. Coming from Norway, I'll also say a little bit about the Norwegian potential role in these matters. But starting with what the previous speaker talked about, the super year for the ocean, yes, it has the potential to be so, and we'll see if we extend the year until June 2022, where the next UN Ocean Conference hosted by Portugal and Kenya will also, in its slogan at least, and in its preparations, look for science and innovation to support the future development. And that's an optimistic approach for the future. It hasn't always been like that. When the Agenda 2030 was agreed in 2015, we were all happy to see a separate sustainable development goal for the ocean. But there is more to the ocean than protecting the ocean for the sake of itself. Is the role of the ocean in these global agendas, the wider sustainability issues that really makes it an issue for everybody on the earth, not only coastal dwellers and sea lovers, but all of us. So that's also part of the reason why we started to develop the plans for this UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, because we felt it was quite important to showcase to the world, to improve ocean literacy, to understand how a healthy ocean can actually contribute to a whole range of sustainable development goals. And in fact, it's difficult to make it without that. Now, we've had a series of reports detailing the problems of the ocean, and the pollution, the effect of climate change on critically important issues like fisheries in tropical areas, which the maximum sustainable yield may decrease a whole lot, up to 85% according to some estimates in West Africa. All of these difficult situations, how can we turn the tide, and how can we make a more optimistic future and a good future for the ocean as part of the sustainable development solutions? And that was actually part of the thinking behind the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy. About 3 years ago, the Prime Minister of Norway invited 13 other heads of state from different countries, from developing countries and developed countries. And they were not the past presidents or past prime ministers, they were the ones in power, and said, could we sit together and agree on an action agenda for the ocean? And they were very different countries. There were Australia, Canada, Chile, Fiji, Ghana, Indonesia, Jamaica, Japan, Kenya, Mexico, Namibia, and Palau and Portugal. So 14 of them. And last December, they agreed on a document called Transformations, which sets out the course for where to go. And they have made a series of commitments. I think there are 74 in the document. And they ought to achieve the headline commitment by 2025 of 100% sustainable management of the ocean areas under national jurisdiction. So, not only protecting 30% of the world ocean, which is also in there, but actually dealing with 100% of the ocean areas under their jurisdiction, and urging everybody else to do the same. And in fact, there are other countries looking at this. And last night we had the news that President Macron of France joins the panel. So from today, there will be, or from the formal acceptance of that, there will be 15 countries on this panel, and covering an even larger fraction of the world's EECs. And it was 30%, it will be increasing. So hopefully this, say, more positive action agenda will create momentum and contribute to this super year for the ocean, which does include climate, it does include biodiversity. There's also a UN Food Summit, which we shouldn't forget, and blue food has a great potential to play a larger role in global nutrition, and particularly for poor people, but also for the world at large. Of course, the BBNJ negotiations, how can we get sustainable management of the international waters? Well, we start by the EECs in this panel, but I think the ambition is working with a wider community and working through the decade to achieve, of course, this also beyond national jurisdiction. So what does the panel say about blue forests? It certainly talks about all the kinds of blue forests, mangroves, kelp, seagrass, and salt marshes, and puts it kind of the action that is needed for that is put under the heading of ocean health. There are 5 components to this transformations agenda. It's ocean health, ocean wealth, ocean finance, ocean equity, and ocean knowledge. And as you can imagine, it belongs in ocean health, but it also belongs in ocean knowledge. And how is that? Well, in ocean knowledge, it's not only science and kind of the traditional ways of collecting traditional and scientific-based knowledge. There is also ocean accounting for the natural capital, making sure that we appreciate the value of these ecosystems that blue forests are a key example of, key component of. So we need to get that going, ocean accounting in a proper way, so that when making decisions about activities on the ocean, that we can account for all the values, not only the monetary value today in kind of the products that we sell, but also the capital and how that is evolving. So how can we do this? We can work with seeing the protection of coastal ecosystems in a wider context. I should mention that one major motivation here could be the ocean solutions to climate change. One of the early expert reports that we produced for the high-level panel was looking at the contribution of ocean economy sectors and ocean ecosystems to solving the emission gap in 2050. And we found out that about 20% of that emission gap going down to 1.5 degree can be closed by ocean economy sector. So it's shipping, it's fisheries and aquaculture, it's ocean energy, but it's also management of coastal ecosystems. And that, of course, is blue forests to a large extent. It plays an important role. What do we do in Norway? Well, we don't have mangroves. We have mostly kelp, and they have been varying quite a lot with climate and other factors. We have projects for restoration. People have mentioned the decade of ecosystem restoration. Green gravel is going on, is being experimented with. We also have groups in Europe who are quite keen on commercial kelp farming. We'll see how that goes, and also more use of seaweed for various purposes. But I think what we definitely learn and see, yes, we can perhaps do green gravel, but you know, protecting and avoiding destroying ecosystems is cheaper and more effective than having to restore them after they've been destroyed. So that's a message that comes through, and we have to always bring that forth. So we need to work together on this. What Norway will be doing on the international scene for this remains to be seen, but I think we are quite keen now. In Norway, we have a Norwegian Blue Forest Network with Grid Arendal, Norwegian Water Institute, and Institute of Marine Research working together to provide the knowledge needed for national policies and for informing policies also internationally. And I think we are seeing a much more uptake in the policy level of the importance of blue forest. Ocean science will help, ocean accounting will help, and the combined role of blue forests in not only the climate issue, but these other issues is what we have to bring forward to the policymakers, is my firm belief. So with that, thank you, Stephen, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Peter, and it was great to hear the statements from our speakers. We've heard something, we've heard a few things very interesting. So, for example, the community-based carbon offsetting of Mikoka Pamoja is being expanded across the coastline of Kenya, which is fantastic, and Kenya is also interested in adding seagrass carbon to their calculations. We've heard that the Seychelles is interested, there are actors in the Seychelles interested in recognizing the value of blue carbon in their MPAs, to understand how they can include that in their national carbon accounting and understand the true value of their MPAs. We've heard how the UK is helping to advance this on the international arena and considers blue carbon part of a nature-based solution, and that really is dear to our hearts at the Blue Forest Project, because it's Blue Forest's project, not the Blue Carbon Project, and it is definitely a recognition of the nature-based solutions approach. We've heard questions over the Blue Bond program and the debt swap for nature program. So this national carbon accounting and definitely the mechanisms to account and measure these values are going to be important, so that we can keep track and answer the pledges that these countries like the Seychelles are making. And you have also related to us that France has just joined the Ocean Panel, which is fantastic, and also given strong support to the concept of ocean accounting for natural capital. So if I can have the presenters turn on their videos, then we can get into some questions. And I'm going to start with a sort of a softball question, but it was one that came up in the Q&A. And the first one is for Pacifica. This was specifically to you, and that is what helped Kenya to include mangroves in their NDC. So what were the sort of key things that helped there? And I'm going to ask similar things from the speakers as for our first round of questions. So Pacifica, if you could answer that.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen. So I think for Kenya, we have already been engaging in a sustainable blue economy intervention, and also we are also taking leadership in the oceans conversation. And most importantly, we have a very active initiatives on the ground. And one of the motivating projects for us at the ministry was the Mikoko Pamoja project that demonstrated that this can be done. And if you incentivize communities, so you have a win-win situation. And we also were very lucky because under the Nairobi Convention, we had a lot of stakeholders who were able to convene very quickly, and they were able to give us guidance on how to capture coastal ecosystems and mangroves and those kind of things in our NDC. And as I said, moving forward, we've not done a lot of work in this before, even if our NAP does not cover coastal zones and does not also cover this. So we are starting like, I would say like in terms of NDC on a blank slate. So there's an opportunity here for everybody who wants to jump in now and to help us get this off the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My second question goes to Stephanie, and I was just wondering, also following the question that we had for Kenya, what can you speak to what were maybe some key moments in science or events that happened on the international stage that helped the UK get behind, or even national recognition that helped the UK get behind this? Where did this impetus for the nature-based solutions come from your point of view?
Thank you. So I think the impetus for a focus on nature was probably kind of multifold, but I think firstly kind of really based on the evidence. And when you look at it, nature, both on land and sea, is down for providing about 2/3, I think, of the most cost-effective potential when it comes to addressing climate change, and it has many wider benefits as well, both climate, but also on the biodiversity side too. And so it's really about recognizing its multiple benefits. In terms of those kind of key scientific reports, there are so many, and so I don't want to pick out just a few, but I think there's certainly been some real landmark publications through the IPCC and IPBES in particular, and they're joining kind of most recently. They're just a few. I think the special report on the ocean and climate change in a changing climate was and cryosphere in a changing climate was really key leading up to COP25 as well. But essentially, I think when it comes to evidence, it's a case of recognizing all the different perspectives and reports out there and recognizing all their contributions.
Thank you. My next question is for Mark. And Mark, you're our US representative on the panel. And I was wondering if you could share a few words on obviously the change in direction from the US government and their, I would say, encouraging support for blue carbon. If you could share a few words on that.
Certainly. Change in direction? What change in direction? I wasn't noticing this at all. Seriously. The new administration is not making blue carbon a priority, is the simple answer to the question. You know, COVID response, economic recovery, building back, dealing with domestic terrorism and insurrection is the priority, not the ocean, not blue carbon. Having said that, the new administration is doing much more on international cooperation related to the ocean, paying attention to international climate agreements, again, having withdrawn from them, and trying to rebuild trust and relationships. I think they're also requiring agencies to calculate and incorporate the cost of ocean climate impacts into decision making. They are spending time and money on thinking about ocean renewable energy solutions, and they are really talking about environmental justice and how ocean-based environmental justice impacts should be addressed. Blue carbon is mentioned in the sense that, you know, it's part of what we're going to do for the United States Paris agreement NDCs, and is part of the administration's commitment to 30 by 30. But you know, we've yet to see, you know, real commitment of money and action. There has been a call from a couple of members of Congress to put together $10 billion for coastal restoration and resilience efforts. There's been some beginning stimulus funding, but you know, we really want to see something real behind these broad 5 statements that I just mentioned going forward.
Thank you, Mark. So there's some interesting movement in the US, and I know that there's at least some legislation on Capitol Hill that specifically includes blue carbon. So there is support in Congress for advancing blue carbon solutions, and we'll wait and see what happens at the administration level. Thank you. My next question is for Ronnie. And Ronnie, it's basically twofold. One is how come the Seychelles sort of got into this and has become the leader in this? And secondly, you know, you mentioned seagrasses, and there's obviously some gigantic seagrass areas that are out there in your waters. And I'm just wondering, what is needed? What is the capacity or steps that is needed to understand that value of seagrass carbon? If you could have some thoughts on that. So it's a two-part.
Yeah. Well, first of all, for your first question, what changed is when we stopped thinking as a small island state and as a victim, and started thinking as a big ocean state and as a incubator of solutions. We moved from being a sort of poor small island states. It didn't get us anymore. Everybody says, yeah. And because we were called small island states, they treated us as if we were small. And when we started talking big, as big ocean states, and we took the size of our country, it changed the way we thought, and it changed the way people looked at us. Suddenly, when they looked at us on the map, we were not so small. We were not specks that were going to disappear. Now, when it comes to blue carbon, now, one thing people don't know, Seychelles is one of the most forested countries in the world. We're about 80 to 90%, our territorial space, 80 to 90% forested. But what does that mean against the Indonesians and Congos and Amazons of the world? So when it comes to the ocean, we realized that there was a carbon wealth there, carbon wealth in terms of wealth in combating climate change, but also that could be a resource for us. And it is something that traditionally in many island and ocean states, people have seen seagrasses as a nuisance. It's not the place to go swimming. But suddenly we realized, with the help of a lot of friends from abroad, a lot of international organizations have come to us, that it was like for us, it was like a blue gold for us. It was something, but it's extremely complicated. It's underwater, first of all. The science we need, the amount of the financing we need, that is beyond our reach. But once you recognize it, and once you come to them, for example, another thing, Seychelles and Mauritius, we are joint managers of the Sierra Bank, which is an extended continental shelf, which is the world's largest seagrass meadow. And who knows what potential lies there, but that's another conversation. So the issue is, how can we raise not just the financial, but the technical support? How can we train the people we need? And one interesting thing I'd like to say to Mark Spalding, one of the things of the proceeds of the debt swap is the Seychelles Conservation and Climate Adaptation Trust, which has been putting out grants to Seychelles. Never in the history of Seychelles has there been so much marine research by young Seychelles, most of them women, than we have now, funded by the debt swap. So definitely what we are doing is, when we set out on this road as a blue economy and ocean champion, there was no template. We were writing it as we're going along. And as we wrote it, as we went along and produced results, we had friends who came on board, organizations, NGOs, philanthropic, private sector, who were attracted by what we are doing and who are now helping us to implement the things after protecting 30% to make sure they don't become paper parts. But what we need is the blue carbon, blue forest community to rally behind island states as ocean states, coastal states as ocean states, to provide us. It's not just the money. The money is important. Yes, we've seen a lot about the G7, about which is a promise and another promise as far as we're concerned. It's the technical know-how. It's getting universities together. It's getting research institutions together. In the University of Seychelles, one of the smallest universities in the world, we have a Blue Economy Research Institute, which we would like to develop as one of the centers for ocean issues in the at least the Western Indian Ocean, if not the wider Indian Ocean. So the key thing, if someone asks what as you said, what is behind this, was political will. We got right from the start political will from the very top. And we have been very lucky, or skillful, if you want, in having 3 presidents, one after the other, committing the government to have a government-wide approach to the issue of blue carbon, blue forests, of how do you harness our oceans for sustainability, conservation, and ocean climate action at the same time.
Thank you, Ronnie. And my next sort of targeted question is for Peter, and it's also sort of a twofold. And one is, you've mentioned the Ocean Panel and their commitments, and I'm just wondering if how a blue forests approach or a blue carbon approach, is it actually being formalized in the discussions of how to help countries meet these types of Ocean Panel commitments? And secondly, you know, Norway is well known as the world's leading funder in climate action. And I'm just also wondering if you have any thoughts on what is needed to advance and socialize the importance of these ecosystems in those types of potential funding schemes in the countries that are of primary interest to Norway. Hopefully that's not too much of a hardball question for you.
Well, thank you. I think it's very important that we look at, you know, the many different positive roles that blue forests can play. It's climate, yes. It's also for supporting, you know, providing conditions for even fish stocks, and we see that also in the kelp forests in our parts of the world, that in fact some of the coastal fish stocks, they depend on this blue forest. And some of these, in some places of the world, these aspects may be easier to knock and to raise in order to get attention. And I don't think there is a sort of all singing, all dancing single solution to this. I think we need to talk about the role and value of blue forests in different places. And we have to make sure that we have top level commitment. I mean, previous speaker mentioned political will. I think endorsement and so on from the highest political level that this is a key priority is what is needed in order to get international support from Norway, but also from many other actors. If we can put together the scientific evidence and the other evidence that protecting for sustainable use is the way forward, and if that is a message taken up by the heads of government and by the really high level people, then we can find money and find ways to finance these activities internationally. I noticed there's a question also from Jamaica here. How do you balance social livelihood needs, fishing, etc., with this about blue forest? And I think, yes, it's quite important that we do this planning of the activities, how to use the various areas in a very inclusive and open manner, and that we have a commitment from the top level that whatever is coming out of what we call sustainable ocean planning in the high level panel, which is really a combination of blue economy plans, marine spatial planning, all the different tools. It has to be inclusive, it has to be iterative, it has to be resourced, it has to be done in an inclusive way. And then we can have local solutions that fit the context of the various areas. I think there's great potential for doing this and doing this right now. So I remain an optimist that we can actually manage to save the blue forests, which are still there. We have lost some, and it will be hard to get them back. But I think we can do this by working with our highest level commitments. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And I'm also going to go to another Q&A question, and this one is for Pacific. I don't know if you can answer this one. We'll give it a go. And this one looks at the essentially recognizing the uncertainty with carbon markets ahead of COP26 relating to Article 6, and if there's been any thought on how Kenya's NDC will address potential carbon credit claims from the voluntary carbon market. And I think this is a question over countries recognizing national carbon accounting and the voluntary carbon market projects that may exist within these countries. Pacifica, do you have any thoughts on that? And if not, then I've got another one for you. But.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen. I have an answer for that. So in our updated NDC, we set aside for each sector at least some potential for trading. So this is already captured in our updated NDC, and we also communicated this. So it's something that we are just working on a domestic. I don't want to call it a registry per se, because it's just a spreadsheet where we are asking people who have these projects to bring them forward, so that we're able to consolidate and know where the projects are. So this is already taken care of in our updated NDC, and it should not be a problem because we have communicated and we have our data and allocated each sector their fair share of for potential trading. Thank you.
Great, and this one is sort of a general one. And that is, we've talked a lot about sort of the successes, but we haven't talked really about the challenges of recognizing this value of blue forests and especially blue carbon. And I'm just wondering if any of the speakers can sort of address sort of what challenges may be in looking ahead, either in recognizing this value in international commitments, or in national policy, or in community-based projects, and I'll pick on you guys if you don't volunteer. So,
Stephen, I'll start with one challenge, and that is, as you know, as well as anyone, it's taken a long time to get an independent sort of peer-reviewed methodology for the measurement of carbon uptake and storage by blue carbon, and that's now been done. But no one has yet done a project and created credits using that methodology. I think we're about to start one ourselves with some of our partners. But until we have some proof of concept and demonstration projects and some credits created, using these on any kind of tradable market is going to be hard, and in turn, perhaps even using them as proof up of meeting NDCs will be hard. And so I think that's going to be a challenge. And it's kind of a chicken and egg problem in terms of what I was talking about earlier on finance. Until you've got your proof of concept, you can't get the sustainable financing behind it. But I think we're extremely close to doing something about this big challenge.
Yes, thank you, Mark. And I'd like to also note that this project represents some considerable proof of concept for blue carbon, which, without the funding from the Global Environment Facility and partners, may not exist, or it may not exist in this form. So, it's very fortunate that the Global Environment Facility chose this project, because yes, even though with this funding and even though with the interest, we still only have a few thousand hectares of carbon, blue carbon, on the voluntary carbon market. And, there are many projects that are out there. There's another one that just got on the voluntary carbon market with Conservation International and the Vera Standard in Colombia, I think. But really, we only have a handful of these projects. So we have a lot of ambition from countries and NDCs, but we don't have that proof of concept yet. Does anybody else have some follow-up thoughts on that? Ronnie, I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement here with Mark just said. That's one of the things we're excited about in Seychelles. It's we're one of those countries working with international partners. As you said, there is a methodology, and we're keen to try it out and see where we can go from there. I mentioned carbon markets in my statement, but Seychelles, as far as we're concerned, is still very, very far from that. First, we have to map all the seagrass and mangroves and find out what their value is, etc. But we are one of the countries that are keen to try the methodology with help of international partners. And but it's still, as Mark pointed out, early days yet.
Yes. Does anyone else from our panel have some thoughts on that one?
Yes, Stephen, I think for Kenya, we also have a challenge with data and also monitoring equipment for what we have. I think we've gotten a lot of support from WWF, Conservation International, and also from working closely with our Kenyan colleagues. So we really need data, and we need to know how to get the right data that will be accepted for our NDC and also for for financing. And secondly, we have very fragmented approach right now to managing this process. And we also have subnational governments, several along the coastline, who are also implementing their plans independently. So it is our hope that eventually we'll be able to have a very strong coordination mechanism between the national and county subnational governments, and also between the subnational governments themselves, and also our partners, and within the national government itself, so that we don't work in silos. So it's not so people who are focusing on fisheries are only focusing on fisheries. Those who are focusing on mangroves are only focusing on mangroves, and people who are focusing on forests putting more emphasis on terrestrial and not mangroves. So I think we need like a framework where we will be able to, using the international platform that has been provided, be able to domesticate and really see a better way of creating synergy among our partners. Thank you.
Okay, Peter.
No, I just tempted to follow up. That's because I support it wholeheartedly. I think it's not only Kenya, where we have a siloed approach to different aspects relating to ocean management and ocean sectors, and even the connection between land and ocean. So the holistic approach here. And then again, you can't do it in a country, I think, unless you have top level support. You have to decide, where is the management, where is the policy responsibility, and somebody has to be put in charge of developing the planning and taking into account all of these different aspects that we need in order for a sustainable ocean in the future. So really getting things together and getting a holistic approach to the ocean management is, I think, number one. And it's a challenge because we have all of these silos.
Thank you, Peter. And do any of the other panelists have some last statements before I sort of recap?
Again, I'll take an opportunity. I think, what we really want to create worldwide for coastal nations, island states, is a climate resilient, sustainable blue economy. By protecting what we've lost, protecting what we have left, restoring what we've lost, and in doing so, enhancing coastal resilience to protect coastal infrastructure, tourism, all that sort of stuff, and to address mitigating ocean acidification to protect coastal food security. All of this creates jobs in conservation, jobs in restoration, jobs in protecting other coastal jobs, and thus we can do something about a post-COVID rebuilding that is a sustainable blue economy and assist countries in meeting their NDCs. And I think we've got a real chance.
Okay, thank you. And to sort of wrap up here, I'd like to say that we've heard some really interesting things. The one thing I'd like to quickly jump on is what Pacifica mentioned about the data needs. Well, it's not just data needs for Kenya, but it's also similar data needs for other countries, coastal and island countries around the world, who may have also a little trouble getting such data and satellite data and other types of technologies. So that's an interesting potential opportunity for more developed countries to step in potentially and support this type of an approach. And also following up on this sort of holistic approach and how it sort of connects with different ministries. Well, sadly to say, the Climate and Environment Ministry is usually one of the least funded ministries or departments in a developing country. However, once you combine a holistic approach, a blue forest approach, then you can speak to multiple ministries. You can speak to food security, coastal protection, tourism, all these ministries that have a lot more voice in reaching the government and helping advance decisions. And that's why not just a blue carbon approach, but I think a blue forest approach is the way forward, a holistic nature-based solutions approach. So I'd like to thank all the speakers very much. This has been a great discussion, and it's very enthusing to see that we've gone the right direction with the Blue Forest Project and we're meeting a need. So thank you very much to everyone. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your invitation. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
And now we've come to.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Okay, James, you want to jump in?
Yeah, just before everyone leaves, I wanted to remind everyone that we have a networking session starting now, basically in 5 minutes, but we'll make sure it's open now so you can join. This will be held on a platform called Remo, different to Zoom. If you've not used it before, super interactive and actually lets you have small group conversations and interact with other people. So I've posted the link in the chat. It will also be sent over to you to your email with instructions. And even if you can only stay for 10 or 15 minutes, please just drop in to chat to some of the other participants, and each table will be labeled with a different topic for you to start the conversation. So yes, we'll see you there shortly, and thank you all for joining the session.
And I'd just like to say a couple of words to close out this part of the session before the Remo session, yes, is that please join us tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time and 4 p.m. European Central Summer Time for day 2 of our Communities, Climate and Coastal Ecosystems Showcase event. Tomorrow, we will introduce some more key results from the Blue Forest Project and the Blue Forest Solutions website portal, as well as hearing some of from our project partners about different topics that have been discussed today. So for now, please join us on Remo, and the link's in the chat, as James said. I'm going to go join there right now. Hopefully I'll see you. Cheers.
See you in there. Thanks, everyone.